Episode 3, Prodigal Son. My name is Yananai Mapako. I am Chiwanizo's maternal uncle. Her late mother, Yananai, was my twin sister. When I left Mupatedzi village, 12 years ago, I had resentment toward my parents because I blamed them for Yananai's demise of being Makadzi Wengozi. Yananai couldn't bear the psychological and paranormal trauma of being Makadzi Wengozi, and she committed suicide and died at the age of 21. Yananai was a beautiful young woman, both inside and out. Ever since her death, I have not been able to delete the pain of losing her, and to this day I still carry the agony in my heart. A year after migrating to England, I completely forgot about the lectures I'd received from my parents and other extended family elders, who had advised me not to let the bright lights of London discard my honourable upbringing and moral teachings. I began to drink alcohol excessively as a coping mechanism to numb the pain of losing my twin sister. I estranged myself from my parents because I felt a great flood of bitterness and unforgiveness toward them. One fateful Saturday night, as I was driving back home after a night out drinking, my car veered off the road and landed in a ditch. I was hurt and trapped, and due to the shock, I lost consciousness. Paramedics shortly arrived at the scene and got me out of the wreckage and whisked me into an ambulance and rushed me to the nearest hospital. I was hauled up at the hospital for 3 weeks, as doctors helped me to recover. After the accident, I quit drinking alcohol, and my heart drew me to serve God because I was grateful to Him for protecting me in the accident. That is how my journey as a Christian began. A few months later, I sought counsel from the pastor of the church that I attended and asked him to help me grapple with the issue of my twin sister's demise as well as my resentment towards my parents. The pastor's advice was that I should not jump to a conclusion but first hear my parents' side of the story. Hearing my parents' side of the story meant bidding farewell to the easy and cushy life I'd experienced in London during the past 12 years and returning home to deal with reverse culture shock. But this was trivial compared to getting to the bottom of my twin sister's demise. My parents had no idea that I planned to return home, and my unexpected return would shock them because they had given up any hope that they would ever see me again. When I left Mupatedzi village, Chiwanizo was 6 months old and she had now grown into an adolescent of 12 years old. I couldn't wait to see my niece. My grandmother combed my wet hair and removed the tangles. Then, as she began plaiting my hair, her mind receded to the past and she walked down memory lane. She never tired of speaking about her beloved twin children, and it was for the umpteenth time that she told me tales about my deceased mother, Yananai, and my mother's fraternal twin brother, Uncle Yananai. Each time that my grandmother went down memory lane, I pretended to be hearing her tales for the first time. But what I could not fathom was whether my grandmother forgot that she had already narrated the stories many times before, or whether she knew this fact but could not help repeating the stories. Yet again, she told me that before she conceived her twin children, she had suffered 3 miscarriages. Therefore, the birth of Yananai and Yananai was a great consolation to my grandparents, and the twins gave them joy and brightened up their home, which had not had the patter of little feet since they'd got married. Yananai and Yananai were born 5 minutes apart, and having shared a womb for 9 months, it was no wonder that the fraternal twins were super close. However, their personalities differed. Yananai was an extrovert, and in contrast, Yananai was an introvert. Yananai stole the limelight and Yananai remained in his shadow. Suddenly, my grandmother stopped plaiting my hair and told me that she was going into her bedroom to get something for me. She returned 2 minutes later and handed me a small box. I opened the box to find a beautiful, beaded necklace, and I held it up in front of me and admired it. Then I thanked my grandmother for the gift. She helped me to put the necklace around my neck, and she informed me that it had belonged to my mother and that she had kept it safe to give it to me after I turned 12. I felt very happy to have something that had belonged to my mother, and I vowed to wear the necklace every single day. My grandmother continued plaiting my hair, and I inquired from her how Uncle Yananai's opportunity to go to London had come about, how long he had been away, and whether he communicated with her and my grandfather. She responded that Uncle Yananai had been a bright student and had passed his advanced level studies with flying colors, prompting his then United Methodist Church-administered school, Hartselle Mission, to offer him a study scholarship to pursue university in London. Her face clouded with sadness as she went on to say that only after a month of his departure, Yananai ceased communicating with them, and they had no clue why for a period of 10 years, he alienated himself. She further explained that my mother had died a month before Uncle Yananai's scheduled departure, and for several weeks after that, he had wrestled with the thought of abandoning his plans because he no longer felt motivated to continue his university studies. We had the mammoth task of persuading him not to abandon his plans, and we reassured him that Yananai would have wanted him to go ahead with his university studies, my grandmother said. It was after several sessions of counseling that Yananai finally agreed to go ahead with his university studies, and we assured him that he'd be so tied up with his studies that 3 years would fly by very fast and that we'd be waiting patiently to welcome him back home, she added. I could only imagine how proud Uncle Yananai had been to have made history as the first young person to leave the confines of Mupatedzi village and travel overseas. Deep down in my heart, I had faith that Uncle Yananai would return home. After 12 hours of flying from Gatwick Airport to Harare International Airport, the airplane passed over Zambia and into Zimbabwean airspace, and it was delightful to see the bright sun that I had missed so much. After getting through customs, I walked into the arrivals lounge, which was teeming with people who were expectantly waiting to welcome their loved ones. I heard excited chatter and jovial conversations among the people who had come to the airport to welcome their loved ones. I felt a tinge of sadness because there was no one waiting to welcome me back home. I felt every bit like the prodigal son, who returned home after several years of being alienated from his parents. I wondered whether my parents would warmly welcome me back home and prepare a feast for me, as the biblical father had done for his prodigal son. A week later I journeyed to Hond Valley. My parents did not have the slightest clue that I was driving home and that in a few hours, they would see me again after a 12-year absence. My twin sister Yananai and I were our parents' only offspring, and I recalled how they had doted on us during our childhood. My parents had struggled to secure money to educate my twin sister and me, and they had sold some of their cattle to pay for our schooling. After 5.5 hours drive along the highway, I turned left onto Nyanga Road, and my car began the dangerous descent through the steep mountain ranges down to Hond Valley. With extreme caution, I snaked down the curved valley road, turning sharply and twisting down the mountain ranges. I viewed Hond Valley through new lenses because of my long absence from my ancestral home. It was as if I was viewing the picturesque landscape for the first time. I marveled at the beautiful land of my ancestors, which looked even more beautiful than I remembered it. After my successful drive down to the valley, I turned my car off the tarred road and into a gravel road that would lead me to my family's homestead. I crossed Hond River Bridge and drove past vast crop fields where men and women were busy working. I passed the growth point, which is called Green Shops, and a few meters ahead I arrived at a place which is called the Centre Ground, which is a major bus stop in Mupatedzi village. My parents' homestead was close to the Centre Ground, and the expectancy of seeing them again was overwhelming. End of part 3.